She pulled the trigger, and the man who once saved her life fell to his knees in the dust. But before that gun smoked under the dying Colorado sun, Eleanor Vance had already lost everything but her pride, and the man she swore never to love. Colorado Territory, 1885. The Vance Ranch stands on the edge of ruin, surrounded by debts and vultures wearing gentlemen's coats. Eleanor, a proud ranch heiress, hires a drifter named Cole Merritt, a man with a past as scarred as the land itself. He's steady, capable, and dangerous in ways she can't yet see. Their alliance begins as necessity, forged in drought and desperation. But when a powerful rival torches her barns, steals her cattle, and threatens her life, loyalty turns into fire, and love into a weapon neither of them knows how to wield. In a land ruled by greed and gunpowder, trust is rarer than rain, and every glance, every word, becomes a gamble between survival and surrender. By the time the first snow falls, one of them will kneel in the dust either to beg forgiveness or to die for it. Because in the West, love doesn't just save souls, it tests how far they'll fall to keep what they can't let go. The wind that swept across the Colorado plains carried the scent of rain and ruin. Late summer of 1885, the Vance Ranch, once the pride of the high country, now looked more like a ghost of its former self. Fences sagged, wells ran shallow. The cattle moved slow, ribs showing beneath patchy hides. What had once been Eleanor's father's empire now rested on the shoulders of a woman who refused to bow to the dust. Inside the weathered ranch house, light from a single oil lamp trembled across ledgers, inked in red. Eleanor Vance, 27, sat at her father's old desk, the same one where he'd taught her to tally cattle counts and stare down men twice her age. The scent of leather and smoke still lingered there, as if the man's spirit refused to leave until his daughter proved herself worthy of his land. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, the promise of a storm or the warning of another fight. A knock sounded at the door. Her housekeeper, June, stepped in, her voice taut with worry. "The drifter's here, Miss Eleanor. Says he's come for the foreman's job." Eleanor set down her pen. "Send him in." The man who entered filled the doorway like a shadow come to life, broad-shouldered, sunburnt, eyes the color of river stones. Cole Merritt. His hat was old, his coat frayed, but his stance carried quiet authority. When their eyes met, something inside her shifted, a spark that didn't belong in a room full of ledgers and loss. She didn't know it yet, but the storm outside wasn't the only one coming. The next morning broke pale and cold, a thin mist coiling over the pasture like breath from the dead. Cole Merritt had been up before dawn, already on horseback when Eleanor stepped onto the porch. From where she stood, he looked carved out of the same dust that swallowed this land, silent, enduring, unbending. By noon, he'd driven the ranch hands harder than they'd worked in months. 2 quit before supper. The others, though grumbling, obeyed. He mended fences with his own hands, rode the range till nightfall, and returned with a report that chilled her more than the evening wind. 50 head missing, he said, laying a weathered ledger on her desk. Cut fences on the north boundary, rustlers, organized ones. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Crawford. Most likely. Crawford, her father's oldest rival, now the wealthiest rancher in the valley, had waited years for this moment. With her father gone, he'd been circling like a buzzard. His men were seen near her wells, near her fences, near her ruin. Eleanor drew a steady breath, forcing calm into her voice. "We'll recover the herd. I'll not have him bleeding us dry." Cole studied her, that quiet fire behind his eyes. "Then you'd better learn to shoot straight, ma'am, because Crawford doesn't play fair." Their gazes locked, neither blinking, both sensing the line they were about to cross from order into chaos, from business into something far more dangerous. Outside, lightning split the horizon, and thunder rolled through the valley like the warning drum of war. Before the week was out, blood would stain that same soil, and Eleanor Vance would learn what it meant to stand alone, until the one man she least trusted became the only one she could. The storm broke before dawn. Rain came down in sheets, hammering the tin roof as if the heavens themselves were trying to wash the land clean of sin. Eleanor Vance rode into it anyway, her oilskin slicker clinging to her frame, eyes fixed on the north ridge where the fence had been cut. Cole Merritt rode beside her, his face streaked with mud and rain, rifle slung across his back. Neither spoke. Their silence said enough. They found the broken posts first, splintered and trampled under hoofprints leading into the ravine. Fresh. Whoever had taken her cattle hadn't gone far. Cole dismounted, crouching low, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. They're pushing them east, toward Crawford's line. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Then we ride. He caught her reins before she could spur forward. You ride, you die. He's baiting you. Then let him choke on his own trap, she shot back. The look he gave her wasn't of anger but of recognition. He'd seen that same fire in men who'd chosen pride over reason and paid in blood. If you're going, I'm coming, he said simply. They rode through the ravine, mud sucking at their horses' hooves, thunder echoing like artillery. When they reached the rise overlooking the valley, Eleanor's breath caught. There her herd scattered, driven by 6 riders through the downpour. Crawford's men. Cole unslung his rifle. Stay here. Len. The hell I will. Before he could argue, she'd already drawn her revolver and fired a warning shot into the air. The riders wheeled around in alarm, then returned fire. The crack of gunfire ripped through the rain. Cole cursed, dropping beside her behind a fallen log. Damn it, woman. You just declared war. Then help me finish it. He leaned out, fired twice. 2 riders tumbled from their saddles. The others fled, vanishing into the curtain of rain. When the echoes died, only the thunder remained. They moved through the drenched pasture, rounding up what cattle they could. By nightfall, exhaustion weighed on them like the storm itself. Back at the ranch, Eleanor's hands trembled as she peeled off her soaked gloves. You saved my herd, she said quietly. Cole looked up from where he was drying his rifle by the fire. No, ma'am. We just postponed Crawford's next move. Oh. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she saw the hint of something softer in him, concern. Maybe even admiration, but it vanished as quick as lightning. The following days blurred into hard labor. Cole reorganized the crews, repaired the fence lines, and slept little. The men followed him without question. Even the oldest ranch hands said they'd never seen discipline like it. Eleanor watched him from the window more than she cared to admit. At night, when she went over ledgers alone, she'd catch herself thinking of him, of the way his voice steadied in chaos, of the faint scar that traced his jaw. It was a dangerous comfort. Then came the fire. A week after the ambush, smoke rose from the southern horizon. The barn, her father's barn, was ablaze. By the time they arrived, the roof was half gone. Flames leapt skyward, painting the night in orange fury. Cole didn't hesitate. He kicked off his coat and ran inside. "Cole!" Eleanor screamed after him, but the roar of the inferno swallowed her voice. Seconds stretched like hours. Then, through the smoke, he emerged soot-covered, dragging 2 horses behind him. His shirt clung to burned skin, his face blackened with ash. She ran to him, her hands shaking as she pressed a wet cloth to his arm. "You could have died." He met her gaze, eyes raw with pain and something else entirely. "Couldn't leave what's worth saving." That night, she couldn't sleep. Rain hissed against the charred remains of the barn while he lay in the bunkhouse, fevered from burns. In the quiet, she finally admitted to herself what she'd been denying for weeks. She wasn't just fighting for her land anymore. She was fighting for him. 2 days later, Crawford struck again, this time through the bank. His messenger arrived with a letter sealed in wax. Crawford had purchased her mortgage. The debt now belonged to him, and he was calling it due. Eleanor crushed the letter in her fist, fury trembling through her. "He means to own me." Cole, pale but standing, read the note over her shoulder. "He means to break you first. I'll not let him. Then you'd better prepare for what comes next." Rent. That next came faster than either expected. The following evening, a lone rider approached under a white flag. Crawford's foreman. "My boss requests Miss Vance's presence for supper. Says he wishes to discuss terms." Eleanor's voice was cold. "Tell him I'll be there." Cole's jaw tightened. "Then so will I." Crawford's mansion loomed like a scar against the hillside, big, bright, and vulgar. As they rode up the drive, Eleanor's hands gripped the reins until her knuckles whitened. Cole walked beside her, his revolver hidden under his coat. Inside, the room reeked of wealth, crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, silver goblets. Crawford greeted them with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Miss Vance," he said, taking her hand too long. "And Mr. Merritt, the foreman who thinks he's more than that." Cole's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Over dinner, Crawford toyed with his wine and her patience. He spoke of debts, droughts, and inevitability. "You could walk away with dignity, Eleanor. Let me take the burden off your shoulders. My ranch isn't for sale." Crawford leaned back, smirking. "Everything's for sale. Even loyalty, even love." His eyes flicked toward Cole. The silence that followed was a drawn gun. Cole's hand moved toward his belt. Eleanor's fingers brushed his wrist under the table, stopping him. Crawford chuckled, lifting his glass. "Careful, Miss Vance. The West has a way of punishing pride. You'll learn that soon enough." They left in silence, the tension between them thicker than the storm clouds brewing overhead. "You should have let me put a bullet in him," Cole muttered. "And start a war we can't win. We're already in one." That night, as thunder rolled across the plains, Eleanor stood by her window watching lightning flare over the hills. Down by the corral, she saw Cole pacing, restless, a shadow caught between duty and desire. She didn't know if what she felt was strength or madness anymore. But as the storm raged outside, one truth burned clear: whatever came next, they'd face it together. And by the time the snows came, someone would fall. Whether it would be her enemy, or the man she'd come to trust with her heart, only the West could decide. The first snow fell 3 nights later. Thin, silent flakes drifted down over the burned barn and blackened fields like a cruel joke from heaven, too late to save what mattered, too soon to promise peace. The men huddled in the bunkhouse, the cattle restless in the cold. Inside the main house, Eleanor stood by the dying fire, reading the latest letter from the bank. Crawford had set a deadline. Full repayment in 2 weeks, or foreclosure. Cole leaned against the doorframe, his arm still wrapped from the burn. "He's squeezing you hard. He wants you desperate." "I won't give him the satisfaction." "You can't fight him on money alone," he said. "He owns the sheriff, the courts, half this damn county. Then we find what he doesn't own." Cole studied her for a moment, that iron in her voice, that same spark he'd seen when she'd faced down gunfire in the rain. "You sound like a general." "No, I sound like my father," she replied, staring into the flames. He stepped closer, the firelight painting gold across his weathered face. "Then your father would be proud." She looked up, and the room felt smaller. "Would he? I'm about to risk everything he built, for a man I barely know." His eyes softened. "You know enough." For a heartbeat, silence, a tension deeper than fear. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The moment balanced on a knife's edge until the distant crack of a rifle shattered it. They bolted for the porch. A lantern swung wildly in the wind. One of the hands was down in the yard, blood pooling in the snow. "Sniper," Cole hissed. "Get inside." Another shot splintered the porch rail beside Eleanor's head. Cole grabbed her arm, dragging her behind a pillar. "Stay down." "Who?" "Crawford's men. Or worse." He returned fire, the muzzle flash tearing through the snow dark. Shouts echoed from beyond the fence line, hooves pounding away. When the chaos faded, the only sounds left were wind and the ragged breath of fear. Eleanor turned to him. "This ends tonight." "No," he said firmly. "You're not thinking straight." "I'm done thinking." Before he could stop her, she stormed inside, grabbed her revolver and a coat. Cole caught her at the door. "If you go to Crawford now, you won't come back. Then he'll learn what it cost to steal from me." "Reach her." He blocked the door. "You're not going alone." Their eyes met flint and steel until he nodded once. "Then we ride." The night swallowed them. Snow fell harder as they crossed the valley, their horses moving slow through drifts. The lantern light from Crawford's mansion glowed faintly ahead, a beacon of arrogance against the storm. "Stay close," Cole said. "Try to stop me," she answered. They dismounted near the tree line. The house was lit, guards posted. Cole handed her his knife. "If anything happens—" "I won't need it," she cut in. "Take it anyway." They crept along the stable wall, the wind masking their steps. Voices carried from inside the main hall, Crawford's, unmistakable, smooth and venomous. Eleanor motioned toward the window. Through the frost-smeared glass, They saw two of her ranch hands tied to chairs, Martha, her loyal housekeeper, and George, one of the men who'd ridden with them since the beginning. Cole cursed under his breath. He's baited you again. Then let's take the hook. 0. They burst through the side door, guns drawn. The room erupted in chaos. One guard lunged. Cole fired, the shot echoing like thunder. Eleanor aimed at another man's arm, sending his pistol clattering away. Then Crawford appeared at the top of the stairs, calm as ever, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Miss Vance," he drawled, "you've come to negotiate, I hope? Release them, or I swear to God." He raised a hand. "Let's not be hasty. You've made this game so much more entertaining, especially with your hired gun." His gaze slid to Cole. "Or should I say, ex-convict?" Eleanor froze. "What?" Crawford's smile widened. "Didn't he tell you? Your noble foreman spent a year behind bars in Texas for assaulting a banker, a man who died, if the rumors are true." Her eyes snapped to Cole. "Is it true?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't kill him, but I wanted to." The air went still, colder than the snow outside. Crawford's smirk deepened. How touching. The murderer and the heiress. A perfect Western tragedy. He turned toward his men. "Take them alive." Cole shoved Eleanor behind a table, just as bullets exploded through the room. Glass shattered. She fired back, the smell of powder thick in her throat. Crawford fled up the stairs, shouting orders. Cole moved after him, reloading on the run. Eleanor followed, heart hammering. The upstairs corridor blazed with lantern light and smoke. At the far end, Crawford turned, pistol raised. The two men fired almost simultaneously. Cole staggered, hit in the shoulder. His gun dropped, sliding across the floor. Eleanor screamed, snatching it up. Crawford sneered, taking aim again, but she fired first. The bullet caught him square in the chest. He fell backward through the railing, crashing to the floor below. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Cole's voice, weak but steady. "You," missed his heart. She dropped beside him, pressing her hand to his wound. "You're bleeding." He smiled faintly. "So's he." Outside, the storm raged on, swallowing the sound of sirens from town. The sheriff's men, summoned by the gunfire, or maybe by fate itself. Days blurred into gray light and whispered prayers. Crawford lingered 2 days before dying of his wound, confessing enough to ruin his empire. The sheriff, finally freed from Crawford's grip, declared Eleanor's debt null and void, citing fraud and extortion. But victory came hollow. Cole lay unconscious in her room, fevered and pale. Eleanor barely left his side. On the 5th night, he stirred, whispering her name. She gripped his hand. "You came back," he murmured. "I never left." "Whoa." His eyes opened slowly, hazel flickering gold in the lamplight. "You should have let me go. I'm not the man you think I am." "I know exactly who you are," she said, her voice breaking. "The man who fought for me when no one else would." He managed a weak smile. "And you, the woman who taught me what it means to have something worth dying for." Snow whispered against the windows. Outside, dawn crept pale and uncertain. "I shot him," she said softly. "I know. I don't regret it." "Matt." "Good," he whispered. "Then neither do I." He squeezed her hand once, and for the first time since the fire, she let herself breathe. By spring, the snow had melted, leaving behind black earth ready for new life. The rebuilt barn stood bright against the morning Sunday. Men worked, cattle grazed, and laughter, real laughter, returned to the valley. Cole stood beside her on the porch, his arm still bound in a sling. "You ever think we'd see this day?" she asked. "Didn't think I'd see much of anything after that bullet," he replied, smirking. She smiled faintly. "You saved this ranch." He shook his head. "You did. I just kept it from burning down again." "Cole." He turned, eyes searching hers. "I don't know what comes next," she said, "but I know I don't want to face it alone." He reached out, brushing a strand of windblown hair from her cheek. "You won't." For a moment, the wind stilled. The ranch, the land, the ghosts, all of it faded until there was only the two of them and the long horizon stretching into forever. And somewhere beyond that horizon, the West waited wild, untamed, and ready to test whether love born of fire could survive the next storm. The spring wind carried the scent of rain and lilacs across the high plains, a fragile reminder that even the hardest winter couldn't hold forever. The Vance ranch was alive again, fences rebuilt, new calves grazing in the pastures, and laughter echoing through the bunkhouse. But for Eleanor, peace didn't come easily. She rode out before sunrise most mornings, following the same trails where smoke and gunfire had once marked the end of everything she knew. Now the grass had returned, but ghosts rode beside her, her father, Crawford, and the man who'd bled for her under that same sky. Cole Merritt stood waiting when she returned from her ride one morning, leaning against a fence post, the sun painting him in warm gold. His arm was still stiff from the wound, but his eyes were clear again, steady and searching. "You've been avoiding me," he said, voice quiet, almost teasing. "I've been working," she answered. "Working's just another way to keep from talking." Eleanor dismounted slowly. "And what do you think I should be talking about, Mr. Merritt?" He smiled faintly. "About why you still call me Mr." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, "Because if I don't, I might forget where the line is." "What line?" "The one between what's right and what I want." Cole stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking like a shadow at noon. "You've fought for this land harder than any man I've ever known. You've got nothing left to prove, Eleanor." "Maybe not to them," she said, eyes glistening, "but to myself. Every day." He reached out, fingers brushing hers. "Then let me help carry some of it. Doesn't have to be just your burden anymore." She looked at him, this drifter who had walked into her storm and refused to leave. The man who'd seen her at her worst and still stood beside her. "I don't know how to love a man without losing myself," she whispered. "Then don't," he said. "Just let me meet you halfway." The wind stirred between them, carrying the faint creak of barn doors, the murmur of men at work. The ranch was breathing again, alive, because they had both refused to let it die. She took his hand, warm, calloused, certain. "Halfway," she said. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the entire crew gathered in the rebuilt barn for supper. Lanterns swung from the rafters, laughter mingled with fiddle music, and the smell of roasted beef filled the air. Eleanor sat at the long table's end, her father's old chair, watching the men eat, joke, and live again. Cole sat across from her, lifting his glass in silent salute. "To new beginnings," he said. She met his gaze. "And to old debts paid." "No." The men cheered, but for the two of them, the words meant more. Outside, the wind shifted, gentle now, brushing through the grass like forgiveness. Later, when the last of the guests had gone, they stood alone under the wide, starlit sky. "I used to think the land owned me," she said, "that I had to earn my right to keep it." Cole looked out toward the hills. "Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it keeps us because it knows we're too stubborn to let go." She laughed softly. "You sound like a preacher." He smiled. "No, ma'am. Just a fool in love with a woman who scares the hell out of him." She turned to him, eyes shimmering in the starlight. "Then we're both fools." And when she leaned into him, the world felt still, like the storm had finally passed. Not gone, but tamed, resting for now. Because the West didn't give peace easily. It demanded it earned through fire, blood, and the kind of love that didn't promise happy endings, only worthwhile ones. A year passed, but the land remembered. Each dawn still broke the same way, light spilling over the high ridges, gilding the pastures, the cattle lowing in the mist. Yet for Eleanor Vance, the sound meant something different now. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was life reborn from ashes. The new barn stood proud, its beams carved with initials from every hand that helped rebuild it. The men called it the Phoenix Barn. And sometimes, when the light hit it just right, the old blackened wood seemed to glow beneath the fresh paint, like the past refusing to disappear completely. On the porch, Cole Merritt adjusted the saddle on a young chestnut mare, while Eleanor carried 2 mugs of coffee out to him. He looked up, smiling at the sight of her hair caught by the morning wind, eyes soft but steady. "You still make that face," he said, taking the mug. "What face?" "The one that looks like you're waiting for the next fight." She laughed quietly. "Out here, there's always another fight." "Yeah," he said, taking her hand. "But this time, we don't have to face it alone." They walked down toward the pasture, where the spring calves stumbled on unsteady legs and the grass shimmered wet with dew. The world was quiet, the way it only gets after chaos has been burned out of it. Eleanor looked toward the horizon, the same ridgeline where smoke once marked the end of everything she loved. Now, sunlight painted it gold. "I used to think love was something soft," she said. "Something that made people weak. And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think it's what keeps us standing when the storm's gone, and there's nothing left but the wind." Cole slipped an arm around her shoulders. Together, they stood watching the herd move like a living tide across the hills. From the porch, the old ranch bell rang out 3 slow chimes, the signal for breakfast. Laughter echoed across the yard. Eleanor glanced up at the sound, her heart full, her voice quiet. "He'd be proud, wouldn't he?" "My father." Cole nodded. "He'd be proud of what you built, and maybe of the fool who helped you build it." The breeze stirred the tall grass around them, bending it in waves that shimmered like silver. As they turned back toward the house, hand in hand, the camera of the world seemed to pull away wide and endless. The ranch below, the mountains beyond, and 2 small figures walking side by side beneath a sky so vast it could swallow their names, but never their story. Because in the West, nothing truly ends. It just rides on into the next season, the next storm, the next sunrise.